The first time I wheeled him onto the balcony, he tried to roll himself over the edge. Not because he wanted to die, because he wanted to see if I would stop him. The entire city worshipped Victor Hallberg, paralyzed tech billionaire, tragic genius, philanthropist saint in a custom-built wheelchair. They cried for him on the news. They called him inspiring. They didn't know what he whispered when the cameras were off. My name is Alara Vance. I'm 32 years old. And a year ago, I walked out of prison with nothing but a sealed record, a scar under my ribs, and a promise to never be powerless again. When his lawyer offered me the private nurse position, I thought it was a joke. A former inmate caring for one of the richest men in the state? But desperation makes strange alliances. I needed money. He needed someone who wouldn't pity him. The first night, as I adjusted his ventilator tubing, he looked at me and said quietly, "I don't hire saints, Ms. Vance. I hire survivors." That was the moment I realized something. He didn't bring me into his mansion to save his life. He brought me there for something else entirely. Victor Hallberg wasn't just rich. He owned half the skyline. After the accident, a late-night collision that left him paralyzed from the chest down, the city turned him into a legend. Interviews, charity galas, headlines about resilience. The iron mind in a broken body. But inside that glass mansion overlooking the harbor, there was no inspiration. Only silence. My job sounded simple. Medication schedules, physical therapy rotations, wound prevention, private care. What his lawyer didn't mention was that Victor had fired the last 3 nurses within weeks. One quit crying. One signed an NDA so tight, she couldn't even tell her husband why she left. The staff warned me carefully. Don't let him get into your head. Too late. Victor studied me the way predators study terrain. He asked about prison like it was casual conversation. What did you learn in there? How do people survive when stripped of dignity? He didn't want medical care. He wanted honesty. Brutal, unfiltered honesty. Then came the first crack. One evening, while helping him transfer to his custom therapy chair, he murmured, almost amused, "Tell me, Alara, how far would you go to reclaim power?" And for the first time, I felt it. This wasn't a job. It was a test. The test started small. Victor began refusing help, but only when other people were watching. During physical therapy sessions, he would deliberately let his body slump forward, forcing me to catch him in front of the staff. If I hesitated for even a second, he'd smile faintly. "See? She's distracted." One afternoon, during a private board meeting streamed from his study, he asked me to adjust his chair height. When I leaned in, he said just loud enough for the microphone to catch, "My nurse used to be incarcerated. I prefer honesty over spotless resumes." The silence on the other end of that video call was suffocating. Afterward, I confronted him. Was that necessary? He tilted his head slightly, eyes sharp. "You told me you weren't ashamed of your past." "I'm not." "Good," he replied coolly. "Then don't flinch when I use it." That was the moment I realized what he was doing. He wasn't humiliating me. He was studying my reaction, testing my breaking point. Then one night, as I prepared his medication, I found something in his locked drawer that stopped my breathing. A file. My name printed on the cover. And it wasn't a medical file. The file wasn't thin. It was thick. Photographs, court transcripts, behavioral evaluations from prison, psychological assessments I didn't even know existed, notes highlighted in red ink. Subject displays high adaptive intelligence, strong survival instinct, potential for strategic manipulation. My hands were shaking when Victor's voice cut through the silence. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." I turned slowly. He was in the doorway, his chair angled just enough to block my exit. "Why do you have this?" He didn't blink. "Because I invest carefully. I'm not a stock." "No," he said calmly. "You're an experiment." The next evening, he hosted a private charity dinner in his penthouse. Investors, city officials, press. He insisted I assist him personally. I thought it was routine. Until dessert. Victor lifted his glass. "I believe in second chances," he announced smoothly. "In fact, my nurse here is living proof." A former inmate now trusted with my life. Every head turned toward me. Cameras flashed. Whispers rippled across the room. My record was sealed. Confidential. He had just exposed it publicly. Victor looked at me, satisfied. "Tell them, Malera," he said softly, "how redemption feels." That was the moment something inside me stopped bleeding and started calculating. I didn't cry. That's what disappointed him most. I told the room a polished, controlled version of my past. I owned every word. I spoke about accountability, about rebuilding, about dignity. They applauded. Victor smiled, but it wasn't satisfaction anymore. It was curiosity. Back in his private study, when the guests had gone, he finally asked, "Are you angry?" "Yes." "Good," he whispered. "Anger creates clarity." He thought he had exposed me. What he didn't know was this. Prison didn't just teach survival. It taught observation, patterns, weaknesses hidden behind power. Victor needed control more than oxygen. His paralysis wasn't his deepest fear. Irrelevance was. Over the next 2 weeks, I became perfect, unemotional, efficient, loyal. I memorized his medication timings, his investor call schedules, his security blind spots, the way he insisted on personally approving certain financial transfers. And then I discovered something else. Victor wasn't just testing me. He was quietly moving large sums of money through shell charities, using sympathy to shield something far darker. He had humiliated me publicly, but Victor Hallberg had just handed me something far more valuable. Proof. And I was about to decide how loudly the city would hear it. I didn't rush. Revenge isn't loud when it's intelligent. It's surgical. Victor trusted me completely now. After the charity dinner, public sympathy doubled. Investors praised his transparency. Donations surged. He let me sit beside him during private strategy meetings, as if I were proof of his moral superiority. He forgot one thing. I was listening. Late nights, while adjusting his breathing support, I memorized passwords reflected faintly in his screen. During physical therapy, I timed how long his assistant left the office unattended. I photographed transaction IDs using the mirrored surface of a silver tray. The shell charities weren't charitable. They were laundering funds tied to the accident that paralyzed him. Victor hadn't been a victim. He had bribed regulators to bury faulty AI software that caused a transport system crash. The same crash that broke his spine. I copied everything onto an encrypted drive. Then I waited. The night of his annual Resilience Gala, with the mayor and half the press in attendance, Victor asked me to wheel him onto stage. "Stand beside me," he murmured. "You're part of the brand now." Oh, I knew. As the projector behind him lit up for his speech, I triggered the alternate file. Financial trails, internal emails, bribe confirmations, displayed across 30 feet of LED screen. Victor's smile didn't fade immediately, but it did. Slowly. The room didn't erupt. It froze. For 3 full seconds, the only sound was the hum of the projector and Victor's shallow breathing. Then whispers. Then phones lifting. Then chaos. The mayor stepped back first. Investors stared at the screen, scanning email timestamps and wire confirmations with widening eyes. The headline writing itself in real time. Victor turned his head toward me, painfully slow. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. I leaned down so only he could hear me. "You wanted honesty." Security tried to cut the feed, but the damage was done. Reporters were already live-streaming. His own board members were refreshing their inboxes, recognizing the internal chains displayed behind him. Victor's jaw tightened, not from panic, from betrayal. "You think this makes you powerful?" he whispered. "No," I replied calmly. "It makes us even." Within minutes, federal agents who had been investigating quietly for months walked into the ballroom. They didn't look surprised. Apparently, I wasn't the only one watching him. As they moved toward the stage, Victor grabbed my wrist, weak but desperate. "You were supposed to understand me." And for the first time, I saw it. He hadn't hired me to humiliate. He'd hired me because he thought we were the same. He thought prison had carved me into something like him. Cold. Calculating. Hungry for control. But he misunderstood one crucial difference. I lost my freedom because I protected someone weaker than me. Victor lost his mobility because he protected his empire. As federal agents shut down the gala and read him his rights, he didn't resist. He just stared at me. "You could have ruled beside me," he said softly. "You understand survival." "No," I answered. "I understand consequences." Here's the twist the city didn't see coming. I didn't send the files to the authorities. I sent them to his board first weeks ago. The investigation had already been moving quietly. Tonight wasn't the beginning. It was the reveal. I didn't destroy him in anger. I positioned him the same way he positioned me at that dinner. Except my version came with evidence. A month later, Victor Hallberg wasn't a headline about resilience. He was a case study in corruption. As for me, my record was still sealed. But my name wasn't whispered anymore. It was respected. And the last thing Victor ever said to me before they rolled him away was almost a compliment. "You passed the test." No, Victor. I rewrote it. And this time, I was the one in control.